Okay, we're smiling. We're putting on a positive outlook on our state. Actually, there is a good reason, because we have a lot of tax revenue that has gone into our state, generated by you, me, and the oil and gas industry. So lack of money isn't the problem. We do have some problems we're going to talk about, but there are some positive things going on in our educational system. And a lot more money has gone into our educational system this year. Feeding the children, going to school, I think, breakfast, lunch, and I'm not sure if they have, I think, still their weekend backpacks of food, extending the school year, but also finding out there are positive things happening. And we're going to start with Senator Gerald Ortiz Pino and what you've just seen recently with our kids.
Well, one example, and there are a lot of programs like this, but the YMCA does a youth and government program in Santa Fe every year. I had a chance to go up there and speak to the students and be one of the observers during their session. It's like a model state legislature. They have a governor, a cabinet, they have senators and a speaker of the House.
Better behavior than our real legislators? What did you see?
They were much better behaved than our real legislators. And I was so impressed with the young people that were there. And they come from all over the state, from Moriarty, from Farmington, from Santa Fe, from all over the state. And they've worked on these bills that they propose, and they have committee hearings, and it was just so impressive. And I really got a glimpse of what's going on in our schools, and it's not all bad. There's some really good stuff going on. And we tend to hear the focus is always on the problem behaviors, the kids that take a gun to school, the kids that get into a fight at a park at 2 in the morning and get stabbed or whatever. But there's a lot going on that's really powerful and good.
That's good.
And I'll share also my granddaughter's story. She's part of a academic decathlon national meeting that's going to be going on in Texas next week, and so she's going to be part of the team that's going there for that. So there's a lot of things going on.
They show what the science skills, math skills.
They have to be fully rounded, all the different areas. That's right.
Congratulations on that. That does make us smile.
Plus, we have the Opportunity Scholarship that's generating high enrollment at all of our 4-year colleges and 2-year colleges in the state. So I think we're starting to see a recovery from the depths of the COVID depression that we were in.
And those were tough times. Yeah. 2 years, possibly even 2 lost years for our kids.
Yeah, exactly.
And the moms and dads out there and the teachers know that.
Right.
They see that. Regarding education, we had an overall budget of $9.7 billion to run state government. We had $3.9 billion of new revenue. A third of that we're kind of saving in permanent funds. A third of it we're giving back to the taxpayers, $500 in June or $1,000 for a couple who filed jointly. Mm-hmm. And that's just to help pay your bills because of inflation. And a third of it was spent to increase government.
Yes.
Part of that was education.
Right.
What's gone on with education?
Well, we put more into the general education budget, so that'll become available in all the school districts on a per student basis. So we're now going to be spending about $11,500 a year per student in our schools. That's the average, because it varies depending if they're in special ed or not. We're also going to be increasing teacher salaries again, paying educational assistants better salaries. We expanded the school year, and all of that together, adding up to about I think $400 million additional is being spent on education this year.
How much more?
$400 million.
$400 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
Over and above what we were already spending. So it ain't cheap. And the same thing on healthcare. We put $250 million more into the Medicaid budget. $250 million more of state money gets matched, and so that really 3-to-1 match, so it's really $1 billion more will be spent on health care. And much of that went for increasing the reimbursement for doctors to make sure that they're able, if they see Medicaid patients, they're able to at least pay their bills, their own bills, and survive, and stay in rural communities. In rural communities, Medicaid is such a crucial part of the medical practice that if they're not getting reimbursed adequately, they can't survive in those small towns, and they leave.
I've heard that maybe 70% of the babies born in the state are in Medicaid families.
That's right.
70%.
70%, yeah.
What about overall patients?
Well, right now there's about 900,000 people on Medicaid. That'll go down a little bit because under the COVID changes, you didn't have to renew every year. And so there's some people who probably have been earning more money than they would be eligible for. So we'll lose some.
But a good 50%.
Oh, at least. Almost 50,
government paying
yeah,
for
almost. And if you count Medicare, 50% of New Mexicans are on government-paid health care. Yeah.
And again, in the rural areas, these doctors were not being reimbursed. And
That's
if
right.
more than half of their patients were on Medicaid and weren't getting their bills paid, that was tough. So we put another $250 million into,
matched by the Fed, so that'll amount to $1 billion more being spent on health care.
I remember when I had worked for Governor Gary Johnson many governors ago, he always felt that Medicaid was going to just bust our budgets. But what we've been doing is it has increased substantially.
Yeah, it has.
But so has our revenue from the oil and gas industry to help pay for it.
And from the federal government. Now, when the federal government sends you $3 for every dollar you're spending, it's hard to argue that isn't an economic driver, because every dollar that's spent in the hospitals is being paid out to the staff of the hospitals. They go out and buy food and clothes for their families, and so it really is an economic driver.
Healthcare, of course, is an issue for all of us. The healthiness of our neighbors, ourselves in the state. We should feel confident so much money is being given now of this extra surplus to pay for the health care.
I think so. The question in the back of my mind is, are we getting better health from all these expenditures? Globally, we spend twice as much per person on health care than any other country, and yet our statistics are dismal compared with other countries. We don't have as long a life expectancy. We don't have we have more maternal deaths. We have lots of other problems that other countries have long since avoided, even though we're spending so much. And so that the question it raises is, are we really getting results for what we're spending on health care? But you can't stop spending it. You can't say to somebody, I'm sorry, you can't have that operation because you're not going to get the results you think. You just keep trying to make it better and better. You
are the chairman of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee.
Yeah.
So you've been studying this for years. What are other countries doing differently? Is it the diet? Is it the guns?
Well, part of it, a lot of it is poverty and pockets of poverty in our country where a lot of these health problems are just exacerbated, and violence also. When you see poverty, what makes a poor person unhealthy? Because they can't get the health care they needed early on, or is it because they're eating a poor diet? They eat poor diets, they have great stress, they live in housing conditions that may make them ill, asthma, black mold, lots of other exposure. But they're just, if it's a noisy neighborhood, crowded housing conditions, they're not getting enough sleep. There's lots of factors that enter it. They say right now the biggest demographic factor in your health is your zip code. Where you live will have the biggest impact on your lifespan and how your general health, much more than your weight or your genetic makeup or any of the rest of that stuff. Even more than the weight. It can really destroy your health to live in the wrong place. You probably know this, but I kind of just learned recently, and I know my doctor keeps asking me, how is your sleep, how is your sleep? Well, I've learned that really a good amount of sleep, 10 hours or so for an adult, 8 to 10, is critical to regenerate the cells to keep us healthy. Absolutely. Which... Yeah, and how many people are getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep? I would hazard a guess that not very many people get that much sleep. But it could be that, but it could be not that simple, but it could be that issue, because if they knew our cells are regenerating during our sleep, that's the only time they can do that. That's right. Yeah. So when you speak about people in poor neighborhoods hearing the gunshots and the ambulances, or sharing a bed with two siblings and they're toss and turn and you can't get a real good night's sleep. Yeah, all of that affects it. So health and education, we discussed, again, putting money into that, but... And housing. We also have some money for housing that wasn't there before. Senator Nancy Rodriguez, last year, I think we talked about this in last year's program, was able to get a guaranteed percentage of all of our capital outlay bonding will go for affordable housing. I think she got 3%. So let's say there's $800 million for capital outlay. 3% or 24 million will be available for affordable housing. And I say, well, 24 million in a state like this? Yeah, but that's matched then with HUD money, with tax credit financing, with local government, with private money, private investors. And we should see a big jump in the availability of affordable housing because of that step that Nancy Rodriguez was able to get done last year. And that just will continue every year from here on out.
That's some of the money because of the surplus that we had?
That's some of the surplus being directed in a way that'll be very productive. And that should begin making a dent in our homeless population. One of the big problems we have is we just don't have enough housing. You know, people go around with vouchers for 6-8 months and they can't find a vacant apartment. So it doesn't do any good to give them a voucher if they can't find a place.
Okay, the positive part of our program is over. We're positive for
so much for the positive.
It's okay. Now let's go deal with the reality. We worked it out, be positive. Crime. I mean, come on, Senator. We hear it in the news. We hear it in our neighborhoods. We're scared. I'm scared to go out at night to some events. I'm going to actually a big event, and I thought, it sadly crossed my mind, I wonder if I should go there because there was a shooting across the country at a big event. So crime is an issue in our neighborhoods. It's affecting all of us. And one thing that failed was revising the pretrial release law, which many folks had said this issue, which was passed quite a few years ago.
The voters passed.
Affects our daily crime rate.
Yeah,
why did it not pass?
Because the facts really don't bear that out. It didn't have any real. I mean, the study that UNM that we asked them to do a study of it last year. They brought the results, and it showed no, that really isn't the case. That you had just as many people who were being detained, and it varied, of course, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Outside of the Albuquerque area, most of the communities didn't feel like that was a big factor. In Albuquerque, those few cases get really highly publicized on the front page or on the TV 10 o'clock news, where somebody was out on a pre-trial release, and committed another crime that was a very serious crime. But that was a very small percentage, actually, of all the crimes being committed. It wasn't a big factor in our crime. Much bigger factor in that is drug use. And we've got to do something about drug use, or else we're never going to get a handle on crime. Because there are three things about drug use. They're under the influence, they're more likely to be violent. To support their habit, they're more likely to commit crime to support their habit, either selling themselves, or stealing. And then the third thing is that the neighborhoods in which they live then become just real magnets for other criminal types, and so you have a proliferation of the crime. Much of the crime that goes on among drug addicts is crime one addict on another. Drug deal gone bad. Somebody says, well, he's got a whole bunch of cash because he's been selling cocaine. Let's mug him and get his cash.
So you're saying it's just pretty much in those neighborhoods, but it's kind of creeping out.
But they're everywhere. Yeah.
Those neighborhoods are everywhere.
And if you look at some of a lot of the murders that go on in this community are at 2 in the morning at a city park, and it's kids mugging somebody that was going to, they had made arrangements to meet them to buy drugs, and so they tried to steal their drugs, and then there's a gunfire and somebody's killed. Or it's domestic violence. And I'm not sure exactly how pretrial release factors into domestic violence at all. And that's about 1/3 of our homicides are family members or people living together killing each other as they get into a fight, or they're having a party and they drink. And then there's a whole thing of teenagers busting into parties with guns and shooting up the place, and that makes no sense whatsoever.
So you, as the chairman of the Health and Human Services, you are hearing about these cases.
Yeah.
You've been hearing about the
Right.
drugs. The drug situation is what's fueling our horrendous crime problem.
I think so. If you look at the things we did try to do this session, we did take some positive steps. The catalytic converter, now, where they sell them should be where you focus, and that's what the bill focused on.
So because people were stealing, they're stealing, going under cars, and
in a matter of minutes, they can take a catalytic converter off, and before you know it.
Is it mainly vehicles, or are there catalytic converters on other engines generating things? Mainly on vehicles?
I think it's just on cars.
Okay.
But I don't know enough about it to know. But I think it's just basically everybody's got to have a catalytic converter now because of emissions controls, and so they take them off. And then they sell them because they have
because of the
precious metals inside,
okay.
Platinum and silver and other things. Well, the people that buy them then, if you buy a catalytic converter, you have to record it. You have to take the data of who sold it to you and so on. So that's the theory behind the bill. And then we increase the penalties for people who don't do that. Now, if they take them to Mexico and sell them down there, I don't know how we control that. I mean, but at least this is the first step. This is the first step. The other thing is those crowd where they go in groups and just shoplift, steal stuff right off the shelves in retail stores in a group and just march right out and get in their cars and drive off.
I've seen it. I've seen it. They just a handful of stuff, just walk out the door.
They're trying to now say you accumulate all of those. And if any one single offense might not be a serious robbery, but if you add it all up, it's a major robbery, and so now you're liable. So we did that bill too.
And that's making it more of a felony rather than
a major felony, like a much higher degree felony, and so they can have a bigger club to hit them over the head with when they
to maybe stop, because they now know it was just a misdemeanor or something to take.
Yeah, well, if it's a small amount individually, but then you add it all up, and
now we're able to do that.
Walked out with $2,000 worth of stuff. Yeah.
Jeez, that's something.
And then the other thing is we put a lot more money into efforts at getting police officers, recruiting them, paying them, retaining them. So a fund was created for all the police departments to tap that, and then a training fund for training them so that they can be better at their jobs. We have a big problem hanging on to police officers because they retire after 20 years. I'm retiring after 20 years, so I can't complain about that. But, if you hire somebody when they're 22 and they retire at 42, you're losing all the skills and experience and knowledge that person has accumulated. And maybe they'll go to another police department, or maybe not. You may lose them forever. And so we're trying to hang on to them a little longer than 20 years.
So this fund, what is the fund supposed to do?
Bonuses, incentives, different things.
To stay on, maybe?
To stay on. Okay. If you stay on for a few more years, we change their retirement things so they can get, if they stay on for 3 more years, they can retire at a full 100% of their final salary, not 90. Other things to try to incentivize them to stay in.
Was there any analysis comparing New Mexico to other states? Are other states having a hard time retaining their officers as well, or just?
I didn't see any of that analysis. If there was one done, I didn't see it. But, I mean, we know we're having a hard time, so we're just struggling to find some solution. The other thing is just to recruit them in. Every state agency, every public agency is having a hard time filling vacancies. I mean, CYFD, the Children's Department, Health Department. The schools did better this year because we raised those salaries so much, so they were able to attract teachers. But there's still shortages in all the state departments. If you call up Workforce Solutions trying to get an answer to why your unemployment check didn't come in or whatever, you wait and wait and wait because there's nobody answering the phones.
Tax and rev.
Yeah.
Tax and revenue. I'm trying to pay my taxes. My wife. But there's a problem and I can't get anybody.
She just went through the same thing. All those departments are having a hard time attracting and retaining employees. So the vacancy rates in state agencies is about 20% across the board. So that means 1 out of every 5 positions is nobody sitting at that desk. Nobody's getting the job done, and we've got to do that. We raised the salaries slightly. I think it was 6% this year, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough to fill the vacancies. We've got to make and we did ask the State Personnel Office to do a thorough analysis of what's going on. Why are we having a hard time filling these jobs?
Well, we're finding at one point when the federal government gave back a lot of unemployment checks to people and paid people, some people say, to stay home.
Yeah.
Is that what? They're just used to staying home and having a hard time coming back? The study in the state, the
unemployment rate is very low. I mean, so I think we just don't have enough people. We need more people.
Well, or is government so big that we don't need these positions either? I mean, our population has grown too. I mean, our population really hasn't grown. I think in our area was stagnant. It hasn't over the past 20 years. We're about 2 million, but our government budget has gone from 20 years ago 4.3 billion to 9.7 billion.
But you want somebody to answer the phone when you call them about your taxes. So I mean, it really is. You know, we all want government to produce for us. I think the other thing is that private sector has stepped up. They're paying much better salaries, and so it's really hard to, you know. The one thing that state government does have, public employment has, is the pension plans, very good pension plans. And so that's something we have to highlight and try to, but young people today aren't thinking about, where am I going to retire? They're just thinking about paying the bills this year and moving my career forward as fast as I can.
But it seems like state police or police officers do think of that retirement oftentimes as an incentive. Why do they recognize, wow, in 20 years I can change careers and just get in? Right. It seems like that's a good incentive or reason why they want to be police officers because of that 20-year. But other state employees don't think at 26 years. Yeah,
and I have to point out that police officers pay a much higher percentage of their income into their pension than other. I mean, one reason we can afford for them to retire after 20 is that they do pay a higher percentage in. So their money is going into it too.
Believe it or not, we just have a few more minutes. I want you to share what you would like to say that happened. I mean, I have my whole long list, but what would you like?
You know, one thing I just want to make sure that people watching the program understand is that the atmosphere in the legislature this year was much more congenial, much more collaborative than we've seen in recent years, both between Republicans and Democrats and between House and Senate. You know, there were years where there were real frictions between the House and the Senate. The House wouldn't send the budget over until 1 week was left in the session, and so we had no time to really put our own stamp onto it. Or the Republicans would block everything that the Democrats tried to do, or the Democrats would just ram things down the throat of the Republicans, and that didn't go on this year. It really was a much more congenial session. In fact, the group of senators that put together the malpractice fix was really 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and they got together and they worked real closely together with doctors and lawyers, and they came up with over a 2-day period, they came up with a bill that passed bang, 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 because everybody recognized this is a solution that we can all agree on. And at the end of it was like kumbaya. Everybody was standing around thanking each other for being so cooperative. I hope it starts a whole new era. And I hope Congress is watching so they realize, gosh, if we really try to work together, we can get so much more done.
One thing that didn't get done, or that I think was vetoed, something with the environment.
My geothermal energy bill, and for some reason it passed 100 votes in favor of it, 3 against it if you add it all up. And then it got to the governor's desk and she vetoed it. And I am not, first, I'm not happy that she vetoed it, and her explanation didn't make a lot of sense. So we have to sit down with her. She did promise to introduce it again, to let us introduce it again, to give us a message so we can introduce it again next year. But this, to me, would be a great way of filling the gap between solar and wind. The sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, but the heat of the earth is always there. And we can tap it and produce electricity from it at a relatively economic fashion and fill in the gap and make us really, when oil and gas aren't available any longer, we'll have the geothermal.
You're looking into the future on our behalf. Thank you for your service again, State Senator Gerald Ortiz Pino. But again, talking about this, looking at the Earth's warmth and capturing that, I mean, we're talking in the future, and that's something that you now are thinking about.
Yes, well, and it could happen within 5 years. We could have electric plants in this state generating electricity from hot rocks 3 miles down below the surface.
You're hopeful for the future for the state. You're hopeful sitting there in the state legislature, not just for 60 days, but you work throughout the year answering constituents' concerns, working on bills as the chairman of the
interim committee.
So. But you're hopeful for the future.
Yes, and thing that gives me great hope are the young people, the young legislators coming in who tend to be really bright and capable and hardworking. And then the young people that come to testify at our meetings and so on. The youth of this state are going to be a terrific asset in the future.
That's good to know. We don't always see that on the news, do we?
No,
we
that's
only
right.
see a lot of
but there are
shoot-ups
some
and
terrific kids out there, yeah.
So you're leaving all of us in good hands, but you've got one more session, and you're going to be here to share what's going to happen in the 2024 session, correct?
Right. We can take last year's program and just rerun it again if you want.
There's still new and different challenges, actually the same challenges. Healthcare, education, crime, correct?
All the same. That's
Thank
right.
you. Well, thanks again for KCHF TV for bringing you this program, Issues and Answers, and thanks for State Senator Gerald Ortiz Pino for being my guest. He's been here many years. He is serving you. He is serving the state of New Mexico for 19 years, and he's got one more year to serve in the state legislature, but he's going to be doing other things that will benefit our state after that. So we do take our hats off to State Senator Gerald Ortiz Pino from District 12. Thank you again, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.